Continuing dialogue on post-Baltimore, if there is a post-Baltimore yet. The NAACP director here joins us tonight. You know, thankfully we're saying post-Baltimore, not post-Providence, right? And I think that's what all of us would like to maintain. And every city in America, I think, does not want to be post-Baltimore. Leave Baltimore where it is, learn from it, grow from it, address it, improve things not only in Baltimore, but in our own communities, because we all are one here in this great country, correct? Nice to have you in. Dan York State of Mind for a brand new week. Thanks for joining us. Jim Vincent will be in our next segment and the following for a comprehensive conversation on that and some other things on the agenda, including these on the rundown. Let's go in and check to see where we are. Yes, I wonder what Jim thinks about some of the things the First Lady had to say. We had a lengthy conversation on WPRO, weekdays noon to 3, about what the First Lady had to say earlier today, and I'll reflect on that momentarily. This is just ridiculous. This is the projection for a Paw Sox Stadium on the 195 development land. Oh, wait, are you kidding me? Do you have to pull our chain in order to get this project done? Yeah. This next conversation, we're still here, is also about the Paw Sox and about a fledgling effort by the good mayor there to try to hold on to something. A pipe dream, I guess. Yes. Finally, and somewhat unceremoniously and anticlimactically, the police officers at our fine institution of higher learning in Kingston, not South Kingstown. The South Kingstown police have been covering URI for some time, but now in Kingston, they got guns too. I think it's a good thing. And you're allowed to say Happy Mother's Day the day after, aren't you? I hope so. Your state of mind is important to us. Tell you how you can get in touch and give us some feedback on what we have to say here or what our guests have to say. Let's dig in a little bit. Yeah, the First Lady had an interesting speech at Tuskegee University this past Saturday. She got a lot off her chest. Here's a CBS roundup their way.
In her deeply personal speech, Michelle Obama told new graduates she wasn't always the fully formed First Lady that addressed them Saturday.
I had a lot of sleepless nights worrying about what people thought of me.
She mentioned the persistent questions about her husband's citizenship, the fist bump with then-candidate Obama that was dubbed a terrorist fist jab, which led to the controversial 2008 New Yorker magazine cover, an image Obama said knocked her back a bit.
Cable news charmingly referred to me as Obama's baby mama.
She told the graduates they would have to learn to ignore the criticism.
The road ahead is not going to be easy.
You know, it was interesting. We had a very long conversation about this on the radio today, and we played other audio when CBS has their take, others have their takes, and I listened to probably 7 or 8 minutes of the speech, and I'm not going to run the excerpts that I ran on the radio on WPRO today, but I will say that I believe the First Lady missed a golden opportunity to inspire. Most of what she had to say was to explain how tough it's been for her, how tough it's going to be on these graduates, how despite all the sacrifices that they have made to get their degrees and the sacrifices and the hard work that they will now pursue in the future will be somewhat ignored by the rest of the world. But despite that, they should fight on and do their thing. You know, the lack of empathy for everybody's individual challenge is not unique to Black America in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I could tell Laura, my director here, all the challenges that I had just getting to work here today, and she'd probably say, oh, but she's thinking, well, I got my own problems, right? There's a little bit of woe is me going on right now that, while born in reality, hardly lifts one up. And I think the First Lady also has a responsibility. Even though she was talking to a targeted audience, she never speaks to a targeted audience because she is the First Lady. She has a responsibility, I think, to lift up America when she speaks. I don't know. New traffic study. You read this in the Journal this weekend? Actually, I think this was in today. Consultant study assesses traffic impact. We have our traditional video of traffic. You know, we have I love this. Got any traffic video? Yep, that's traffic. Everybody knows it. But if you don't think you're going to be looking at that kind of traffic getting into that place, if it's approved on that land, then you're whistling Dixie. I'm not saying it's a reason not to do it. And I think people always find, it's one of my favorite things to do, is to find out how you can beat the traffic. There are different ways to get into the city. And the consultants to the Paul Sox, who got some publicity in the paper today, the Providence Journal, are trying to suggest that, you know, the flow out and the flow in are very different things. And because you can come from 4 or 5 different areas to a ball game in the city, that the traffic won't necessarily be impacted that much. And they indicate that, you know, a heavy contingent will be coming from northern parts of the state, driving southbound into the city, and that's not so bad. Have you ever taken a look or lived in the southbound traffic on 146 and 95 in the late afternoon? I mean, I drive by it most nights. It's ridiculous. So, you know, I don't mind the continuing pursuit of the stadium if the numbers are right for the taxpayers, but please do not pull my leg over the idea that it's not going to be difficult to get into the city. You've got to be kidding me. Meanwhile, it's like, hey, we're still here. Don Grebian, the mayor of Pawtucket, he's just trying, man. He's writing letters and he's asking Governor Raimondo, the Speaker of the House and the Senate President, to please maybe do a special session or something like that to review in totality the entire project, Paw Sox, McCoy, Providence, to give it another visit, to take a breather, to consider all the issues. You remember when he was back in March telling the story about how he's just going to keep fighting to the end? You got to be planning what your out plan is, yet you're still fighting.
Right.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, what do you think your chances are of saving this deal?
No, I mean, it's probably 1 or 2.
But worth fighting for.
Absolutely, no, it's worth fighting for.
Well, he's true to his word. He's writing the letters so the constituents can never say Don Grebian didn't fight to the end. But the Speaker, in his always predictable fashion, said something like this: I believe the decision's been made. While I certainly understand the mayor's concern and applaud his efforts, we have to move forward. And applaud his efforts. It's so condescending, isn't it, when Nick Mattiello speaks? Anyway, Don, they're leaving. Get your plans ready, one way or the other, as to what you're going to do in that space when they're gone. All righty, the headline here and the thought here, and then the headline, they finally have done it. The police officers at URI are armed, and I think for good reason.
This was a very slow process with all the stakeholders coming together.
URI is now the last public university in the country to arm its police. This comes 2 years after a gun scare at the Chafee Social Science Center.
We are the first responders on this campus, and we couldn't effectively respond there.
Still, the decision to arm campus police has students divided.
They are here to protect us. They're not here, to hurt us. So I think it's definitely a good thing.
There is a lot of stuff in the news right now about police and obviously all the racial stuff like that. Not that generalizing police, but I don't know if I feel comfortable with them having the weapons.
Well, thanks for your thought, young man. I do, and so do most parents who are sending their kids to school, and so do most kids on the campus, I would think. Anyway, anticlimactical, don't you think? I mean, there was a big, you couldn't buy a phone line when this first came up, and now everyone's kind of like, yeah, okay, which I think is all right. Hey, it was Mother's Day yesterday. Breaking news here on Dan York's State of Mind. No, I actually was driving into work today thinking, you know what? Actually, I was driving home from work Friday afternoon, both this show and my radio program, thinking, I didn't say a word about Mother's Day on either the radio or television shows. I must have been too busy saving the world or discussing and debating important matters. Is it okay and polite the day after Mother's Day to say to all the moms, Happy Mother's Day? Your life's work is so important to us. And it shouldn't be one day anyway. Every day ought to be Mother's Day. Father's Day is another conversation. When we get there, I won't forget. I miss my mom every day. When we come back, oh, you know, you have a thought on Mother's Day or whatever, your state of mind. I always like to throw the number up in case you have something to say. 228-1886, state of mind at myritv.com. Tweet and Facebook posts. There you go. When we come back, Jim Vincent, NAACP. Stay with us. So I don't know, I feel like this is a continuing conversation, and it ought to be. And for those of you who say, oh, I'm tired of this, well, that might be part of the problem, I think. Let's take a look at the headline, Unsettled Peace in Baltimore. The key here is, and there's all sorts of headlines that go along with it, you know, all sorts of critical questions, and you know, even New York, publicity for a fallen officer, but followed by some incredible money they're spending on all sorts of smart training. You could say sensitivity training, you could say all sorts of things, but I think police, law enforcement across this country have conceded that they have to work harder at this thing, right, Jim?
Yes.
This thing. Now, what would you call? Welcome, by the way. Nice to have
Thank
you
you.
back.
Thank you, Dan.
What would this thing be called for you?
The thing is to basically understand that once you put that uniform on and put that badge on, that professionalism and accountability mean everything. And you cannot have a bad day. I mean, I can have a bad day, you can have a bad day, but you really can't have a bad day when it leads you to acting unprofessional against anybody, because problems sometimes happen after that. And we've seen it time and time and time again where people just did not live up to their oath. You know, they did things that perhaps was not exactly professional, and it led to things that happened, and then now you got a powder keg.
Well, here's the thing. I'm trying to figure out how to define what has been a year's worth of tough news, right? I'm trying to define. How do you define it?
I just feel that, you know, it's been a tough year. The silver lining in it is that now we have to talk about this as well as race in general, and I think that's always a good thing. If we're ever going to solve anything, we have to have a good dialogue. And I just feel that, you know, I mean, all police are not bad. Police are not our enemies. We want police in our communities to protect us, to serve us, or whatever. There should be a great relationship all the time. And when it's not, it's a tragedy on all sides. So what we need to do is look at what the problems are. Maybe it's improper recruitment, not enough recruitment of people of color, not enough training. You know, whatever it is, we need to solve that and make sure that we have that relationship that once we had with police, and that we're partners in terms of.
Well, look, you play a pivotal role. So, you know, if I'm Mayor Dan York and I bring you in and I say, Jim, all of the broad stroke aside, tell me what you think in the city of Providence we need to do. Perhaps something learned from Baltimore that you think. Give me a specific thing that you think would be pivotal to creating more trust at all. What is it?
I think the one thing is that in Providence, as well as just about any other department, there are officers that should not be there because it's just not something that they should be doing, because they violate the trust of the public. They diminish their status as a police officer. There has to be an easier way to get those officers off the force. Right now you have a policeman's bill of rights that should be there, because it protects police from being unfairly accused of stuff. But it also protects police that are not good police from being fired, you know, and disciplined properly. So what happens is that you have 2 or 3, or who knows the number, that don't act appropriately in the community, not knowing one from the other, tarnishes the whole department. And then that distrust starts. And then all of a sudden you got a problem in terms of police-community relations. And I work with chiefs all the time, and I said, look, you got to get rid of these bad apples, because if you don't, then you're not.
And the response to that request is it's too tough?
Well, the
system's too hard, the protections, the Bill of Rights, all that?
Yeah, a lot of it is that. That's not all of it, but they tell me privately that you know, it's hard to get rid of the bad apples. And I'm saying, wait a minute, you know, your whole department, the safety of your officers depend on this. We have to have another conversation, because if that's the case, then I'll help you with that and make sure that these officers that tarnish the badge, that disgrace the uniform, they're gone, because they're not helping anybody.
When you make this impassioned presentation, are you thinking, I'm not asking you to name anybody, but are you thinking of individuals?
I'm not, but I know that the community has identified people in the past that seem to be repeat, offenders, and somehow they're there for a while. I mean, you don't get no second chances. I mean, you wear the uniform. I mean, we place police and clergy and teachers in high esteem, and we give you your trust and we give you the benefit of the doubt, and you should, and you know that. So when you violate that's a major thing. You have to act professional at all times.
Do you think there's a number? What are the 400 plus police officers we have in Providence? What's the number?
I'm not sure. Hopefully it's only 1 or 2. I would hope that it's not 20 or whatever, because, as I told other officers, by you not informing on your fellow officer that's not doing the right thing, you're not helping yourself, because people are going to look at you the same, and it could end up costing you your life. So this person's putting you in danger. It's putting your chief in danger, because if something happens, then politically your chief's going to be gone, and then the mayor's going to be gone too, because he's not going to run for re-election if you have a major tragedy. So because of these people, a whole system is in paralysis? I don't think so. We have to get to the bottom of making sure that all police act in a certain way that the community can have no other attitude but respect and trust, and to make sure that when there is crime, then we're the first ones that go to the police and say, look, that guy there, he did it.
Do you think this city is the same potential powder keg that Baltimore became?
I don't think it's
for the wrong situation, caught on tape,
I don't think it's the same situation as in Baltimore, in that in Baltimore you have decades worth of allegations of police brutality, you have abject poverty that's beyond belief. However, and I always say however, here in Providence, you got things under the surface. There was a Wall Street 24/7 poll released about 6 months ago that said that Rhode Island is the 3rd worst state for blacks in the country. Because of the home ownership disparities, median income disparities, poverty disparities, even death disparities. 234 individuals of color versus white per 100,000 die, which, on its face, 234 more out of 100,000. But they said that disparity is the largest in the country, between black and white. The home ownership disparity, 30 percentage point, is the largest in the country. The average black person in the country has a median income about 67% the white income in the country. But in Rhode Island, it's 52%. So the income gap, the home ownership gap, the poverty gap, the death rate, which speaks to health care, there's some latent stuff underneath the surface that could trigger something that we might not see coming. ACLU also talked about the school-to-prison pipeline, okay, disparities in terms of the schools, the courts, the prisons. That also is problematic. So I'm not saying it's going to be a full-blown Baltimore or even a Ferguson, but to say we are not going to have anything because we have excellent police community relations, which I think we do, I think we need to be careful.
More with Jim Vincent. Stay with us.
This has been going on for quite a while, and it's unfortunate that it took to this point for something else to happen.
This is about the fundamental relationship that communities of color have with their police departments.
There are certainly issues around the country, and we're not perfect, but I would say overall our relationships are pretty good. In fact, I'd say they're very good.
Police accountability is important, police professionalism is important, and black lives do matter.
So there you were in this post-Baltimore thing. By the way, what does that mean? Black lives do matter. I mean, I think a lot of America is trying to figure out. I mean, my response is, well, no kidding.
Well, I mean, I think it's speaking about all the unarmed black men in the last 2 years that have been killed by white police, and seemingly there's been no indictments, there's been no charges except in Baltimore, and people are saying, well, I guess it's open season on young black men. You can do anything to them, and it doesn't matter. They're not human. They're disposable. They're not full citizens. Because if they were, then you would see some indictments, some charges, or whatever, like you would see with somebody else. And that's the theory. That this group of people is not worth even a charge, or let alone a prison sentence. And all our lives matter. And you're right, black lives, white lives, but we're talking about black lives here.
I think one of the things that's interesting is that, and I've been talking to a lot of people since this Baltimore thing blew, from the African American community, not just elected or appointed folks like you, and there's a pretty growing consensus that the black community, for lack of identification, needs some conversation as well of significance. And how does that work? Does everybody get to see that debate, or is that something that happens in the churches and the neighborhoods? And how do we know when our wonderful black communities have actually done a little bit of introspection themselves because of the things that we know are apparent in the challenges, the social challenges, the cultural challenges that exist, fatherless families et al. I could run down a list.
Well, one of the things that's good about these police community relations forums that we've had here in Rhode Island, over the last couple of years, is that those kind of discussions actually come out. You have black men standing up and says, hey, let's not forget black on black crime. Let's not forget that within the discussion of all of this. And you have other people that do bring up the fact that, we have to do a better job in terms of parenting. We have to do this, we have to do that. So you don't have any forums where you don't have some of that right there. And so if you go to a forum, you're invited, so you get to hear that, you get to see that.
Ricardo Pitts-Wiley, you know him?
Yes, I do.
He said something here, it just dawned on me, so I don't have the tape, but he said something to me either on television or radio last week. He said, we don't have the community conversations that we used to. We don't have the barbershop conversations that we used to. We don't have the on-the-ground critical analysis of the community that we used to. And I said, well, it probably mirrors America's not talking to itself like it used to. I don't think that's a black deficiency. It's an American deficiency.
I think you're right about that. This is a generational thing.
But
yes.
We got to bring it back somehow through whatever platform is necessary, seems to me.
Well, I think, these forums and these meetings kind of is bringing it back because, you are having a lot of deep conversations at these forums that are not just police versus the community. You do have the black community talking with each other, with the white police and white community members right there. So I think, this open dialogue that you have at these forums and even other meetings is a beginning. I mean,
let me ask you this, because we only have a little time, and we never have enough time when you come in. Are you optimistic or pessimistic?
I'm always optimistic. I'm optimistic, but I think we need more discussions like this and other discussions because I hear members of the white community, and to me, a lot of times they seem very clueless to what's going on in terms of America.
Because they want to be, or because there's just not enough story told?
I think it's both. They live in their own world, and they think everything is equal. And despite all the evidence is this, but I believe this. Well, that's a problem. As an individual, you got to deal with reality, and I guess it's a hard reality. You don't want to think America discriminates against students that graduate and going off in their careers, and then they go on their first job, and then they see discrimination, and they don't believe that it's going to happen to them.
All right, so you know what? You got to come back.
Okay.
We're out of time, but I mean, that point alone, let's do it on the radio. I'll call you in.
All right, all right.
Jim Vincent, NAACP. Stay with us. That last thought that Jim Vincent brought us deserves follow-up. Sometimes we just don't have enough time, but that's, well, we got a radio show too, right? I'll try to get Jim in tomorrow, the next day on WPRO, weekdays noon to 3, and keep the conversation going. And the conversation is an important one. We'll see you tomorrow on the radio at noon and back here at 7:30 tomorrow night on My State of Mind. The governor, a post-mortem. See ya.